Well, good morning. All right. I wondered what I would say here because whenever someone pinch hits for Brian, they always pop up, give their name and their title here at the church. And I appreciate Zach already introducing me because that's pretty much all I had. My name is Mike Nugent, and I'm married to Dara, who sings, and I sit over here. And that's pretty much me. But I am excited to be here. I trust you all had a good Thanksgiving holiday. Certainly hope you did. I know we did. This is our year to get our family, our kids come home. This is our year with them. And so I don't know if they had a good time, but I had a great time with them. And, the thing about Thanksgiving, that was a big one in my family growing up. But there was always a little bit of a beating about it because you're at the dinner table and your aunts and uncles and cousins are there. And you start telling the same stories over and over and over, right? And there was one my mother loved to tell. And she's not here to tell it anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. And it throws me under the bus, so I know my family will enjoy it at least. But she used to love to tell this story every holiday about watching TV. When I was about 5, 6 years old, my brother's a year younger. We were living in Houston. And my mother and father were still married at the time, and they were in there watching the 10 Commandments. Came on every Easter. This was not a movie that excited 5 and 6 year olds. Charlton Heston and a bunch of guys in long beards walking around the desert in robes. I'm out. But we put our capes on, and we're running around the house having a good time. Every now and then, we'd poke our head in, see what's on TV, and we'd be out. One point in that movie, it's a chase scene, the action set piece of the 10 Commandments. Moses is leading the children of Israel away from Pharaoh's army, and they get to the Red Sea. And my mother would say that my brother and I, we just stood in the back, and we were in on this. We wanted to see what happened. This looked scary. This looked bad for God's children. And evidently, I stood in the back bug-eyed when Charlton Heston raised his staff and the waters parted. And he led the children of Israel across dry ground to the other side. And with Pharaoh's army bearing down, he gets to the other side. He raises his staff, the waters descend, and the army is destroyed. And I was in the back, again, just bug-eyed. And with wisdom well beyond my 6 years, I said, man, I got to get me one of those sticks. Now, my mom thought this is probably a good time to have a theological discussion with her young son. And she explained that it was not the staff that did it, that it was God and his power working through Moses and the staff. And my debate skills were not polished then, really aren't now. And my younger brother stood up for me and said, well, Mom, if God will do that for Moses, he'll do it for Michael too. And I really like my brother's theology. And we might be able to shoot some holes in it, but the truth is, a lot of times I don't expect God to do much. I know I'm supposed to be uber spiritual right now, but the truth is, I don't. And a lot of y'all don't either. So I'm in a good place. But during this time, this season of expectation, I want to challenge us today to remember it this season, but really every day, that the same God that we worship now he's the same God that worked through Moses. He's the same God we walk with and empowers us today. And I want to look at a little bit of a strange story. Not that strange, but it's not a Christmas story. But I want to be in the Old Testament in 1 Samuel. We're going to start in chapter 22. We'll be there in just a minute. But the story of David in a season of his life when things didn't quite go like he thought they would. And we know David, right? Came to prominence, slaying the giant. He slew Goliath. And Saul is really taken with this young guy. And all of a sudden, he makes him his musician. He brings him into the palace. He makes him, or he puts him in charge in the military. He's a great warrior. He gives him his daughter. And I mean, I don't care who you are, marrying the king's daughter, that's a great career move. And things are working out for David. He lived this charmed life. And everything he seemed to touch for a while turned to gold. And the people loved him. He was praised through song. They would say, hey, Saul has killed his thousands. David has killed his tens of thousands. And everything was going. His best friend was King's son, Jonathan. Everything was going well for him until it didn't, because Saul heard those songs. And while Saul got a little due in it, he killed his thousands, he didn't like that the people were really praising David. So he gets jealous. And that's when he starts chunking spears at his head. And he runs David out of town. And this golden boy, one by one, starts to lose everything he had built. He's lost his position in the palace. The king's trying to kill him. Then the king, Saul, takes his wife away. So he's lost his family. He's lost his job. Then, he's lost his home. He's on the run now. He goes to see Samuel, his mentor, this guy who he's trusted, who always was able to speak God's truth to him. But Saul knew where he was going. He couldn't quite get to Samuel, so he ends up going to see Jonathan. And he does get to see him and say goodbye. But he's got to take off because Saul is hot on his trail. In fact, Israel is so hot, he's got to leave. So now he has lost his country. And he ends up going to Gath. Y'all know who's from Gath, right? Well, maybe not. Goliath. He literally went to his sworn enemy's home seeking shelter, seeking refuge. How welcome do you think he'd be there? Yeah, not very. About as welcome as we were in Austin on Friday night, all right? I know. That just drew me off sides. Speaking of offsides, no. So he's run. The Philistines don't want him. So he goes into the desert. And in 1 Samuel 22:1, it says, David departed from there to the cave of Adullam. He's left the palace. He has lost everything. He's lost his security. He has lost a guaranteed future. And now he's in a cave, living in the cave. In fact, this is a picture a friend of mine took that is in that region, and you can see a little cave up there. This sparse, desolate, almost lifeless place is what David traded the palace for, to be here. I'm going to leave that up there for a second. In fact, I'm going to leave David in the cave for a moment. I want to talk about it. Because here's the deal about the cave. The cave is where dreams go to die. The cave is where we end up when everything we worked for maybe gets stripped away. All the props, all the supports that we build our life on gets knocked down. And we end up in the cave, a dark place, a desolate place. When we thought we might have a great life and do great things, thought we might have a great family, that we'd boldly go and do these incredible things, and life didn't work out like we thought. And we up in the cave. Again, the cave is where dreams go to die. And, with this many people in here, let's be honest, there's someone in a cave right now. We've all done a little bit of cave dwelling. And if you haven't, I'm going to encourage you, because you will. You will. We all end up there at some point. And I know my wife is over here hearing this going, oh my gosh, he's gotten pretty dark. And by the way, it ends well. I'm just going to, spoiler alert, but we've all had seasons in the cave, and I know she's going over, what's he going to even tell? He's going to get personal, and here we are. Because, you could be in here and you could have lost your job. And you could have incredible financial struggle right now. And you see no hope, no light. You could have lost a loved one, a friend, a mentor, someone who had a huge part of your life, and they are now gone. And at the moment, they're just replaced by darkness. You may have gotten a bad call from a doctor at one point, bad diagnosis, and you just got sucked into the cave. Before I go on to anything else, I want you to know one thing. If you leave here today with anything, I want you to know this. God does his best work in caves. God does his best work there. I'm going to leave that up for a little bit because it's in the cave where we get molded, where we get shaped. And we just went through 1 Peter where we talked a lot about this, a lot. But I know we're a pretty open and transparent family. We talk about a lot, but there are some things we don't talk about. So I'm just going to do it right now in front of y'all. No, my wife, several years ago, about 7, 8 years ago, there was a 14-month period where she had 5 heart surgeries. No one in our family knew till after the 3rd. We didn't tell anybody. We didn't want people to worry. We didn't want people to stress. And yes, I realize you're all saying, but we could have been praying for you. I get it. And y'all sure did after the 3rd one. But after her first one, I'll never forget, we went to the doctor. It was a 90-minute procedure. And after 6 hours, the doctor came out to talk to me. We weren't worried going into this deal. They knew exactly what was going on, but they were very wrong. And he was as white as a ghost when he came out. And he said, well, this is way above my skill level. And he said, I need to send you to this doctor. He's the best in the world, and he happens to be in Austin. But he is the best at this issue. And so we went to Austin. And this guy came in, and y'all who are my age and older know what I'm talking about here, so I'm sorry for alienating 70% or 10. This guy was like a cross between Jesus and Barnaby Jones. He was amazing. His bedside manner, lacking. He explained to us what was wrong with her heart. And he used the phrase, he just looked at us and he said, it's uniformly lethal, which was like a baseball bat across the head. And I interrupted him and I said, so wait, hold on. Life is uniformly lethal, but what are you talking about here? And it wasn't real good. And it's genetic. So your kids are on the block on this deal. We got to get them tested. So we obviously had to kind of tell them at this point. And it was a gut punch that day. And if you don't know my wife, first of all, shame on you. But secondly, she's not afraid to talk. And we didn't talk much that day. And I remember we left the hospital, went to Uncle Julio's, her favorite restaurant, and we sat there in silence, processing what we had just heard. And we get in the car, and it's still silence. And I remember we're driving down 290. I think we'd just gone through Eglin, and I start laughing. Just out of the blue, just start laughing. And she looks at me and she smiles and she's like, what's wrong with you? And I just kept laughing. And I looked at her and I said, he said what you have is uniformly lethal. And she starts laughing. And we don't know why we're laughing. And I said, if I had given that guy a dictionary with tens of thousands of words, and I said, choose 2 of them and give me the scariest phrase possible, he couldn't do better than that. He couldn't do better than to tell me my wife had something that is uniformly lethal. And we laughed, and we cried, we were scared. Scared for her, scared for our kids, who, by the way, they all checked out. She's doing great. But, it changes things. But it changes you. But it was dark. It was really dark. And when you figure out all the props and supports are gone, and you fall into the arms of God, because he's all that's there, I'm going to tell you something. You learn that he's enough. You learn that he's enough. And there should have been an amen somewhere there, but we'll get there. We'll get there. So David is in this cave of failure, this cave of disappointment. And sometimes, we end up there because of foolish choices. Sometimes we end up there because circumstances beyond our control. But usually it's a combination of the two, but we do get there. And again, God does his best work there in the cave. So, and again, the great promise, as Clint led us earlier, he meets us there. He meets us in these places. And David, but not only is God with him in this cave, as you're going to see, but there's a few others. I love this. Others came to him. This is just funny to me. Everyone who was in distress and everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontented gathered to him. Just the kind of team you want to gather, right? Everyone who is the last kid picked on the playground at recess is coming to David. And he became captain over them. He became the leader of the losers. But they built, and it says there were 400 of them. They built this little hilltop community, this among the caves called Ziklag. And they had families, they had wives, they had children. They built a little community. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And he began to rebuild his life until life hit back at him again. And in 1 Samuel chapter 30, it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag. They had been off, and they came back on the 3rd day. The Amalekites had made a raid on the Negev and on Ziklag and had overthrown Ziklag without the men there and burned it with fire, and they took captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great, without killing anyone, and carried them off and went on their way. When David and his men came to the city, behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters had been captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted their voices and wept until they had no strength in them to weep. Have you ever cried like that before? Have you ever felt like that before? That you just had no more strength to cry, no more tears to cry, no hope? In fact, Neil Clark Warren, who's a psychologist and that I got to do some work with years ago, did eHarmony. You might have seen him on his commercials. Ask me my eHarmony story sometime. It's embarrassing. Horrifically embarrassing. But Neil Clark Warren says that the death of hope is the biggest reason marriages fail. Relationships fail when there's no hope, because when there's no hope, there's no motivation to change. And this is exactly where David and his men are. They have nothing left. They've lost, their families have been stolen. And David, he's got it kind of worse than the others, apparently, because they're blaming him for it. Moreover, David was greatly distressed because the people talked of stoning him, each one because of his sons and daughters. Their grief has turned to anger, and it's directed at David because they're blaming him. Because we always want to blame people, don't we? When things go bad, they are going to blame him. He's going to be the object of their wrath, and these losers want to kill him. And David is standing in the cave. In fact, we know David wrote so many of the Psalms, and this one was written during his time at Adullam in a moment just like this. Maybe based on this episode, this is what David did when he was in trouble and he had lost everything. He says, I cry aloud with my voice to the Lord. I make supplication with my voice to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. And just a quick word about this, because with the Psalms, there's so many different Psalms. There are Psalms of thanksgiving. There are Psalms of wisdom. Psalms of basically kingship, where we are praising God through the Psalm. And there's Psalms of lament. Obviously a prayer of lament here. And he says, I pour out my complaint before him. I declare my trouble when my spirit was overwhelmed within me. You knew my path. In the way where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see, for there is no one who regards me. There is no escape for me. No one cares for my soul. I'm all alone. I cried out to you, O Lord. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give heed to my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring my soul out of prison so that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully for me. Even when he was at the bottom of life, he cried out to God expectantly. He knew that God was faithful and he could trust him and that he would show up. And in this moment, God showed up. At the end of verse 6, this is just a marvelous verse, and it's really hard to do better than this one in the entire Bible. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Everything's gone again. And are you like me when things just are snowballing and you cry out and you're like, Lord, just give me a win. I'm tired of taking these losses. Just a little hope, a little glimmer. And here, when it was completely dark, David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. And I love this so much. Because I know, especially I think in our day and age, when we fail, when we're disappointed in ourselves or with how things are going, a lot of times shame comes with that, right? And if you're like me at all, and I certainly hope you're not, and I'm serious, you don't just experience failure or experience disappointment. You feel like you are a failure. You feel like you are a disappointment. But God's love doesn't let David get there. And she shows up with a love that is stronger than any success or any failure. And he strengthens David. And David is in that cave, but he doesn't stay in that cave. And he follows God out of it, and he looks at his guys, and he says, here's the plan. And he stepped up and led them, and they got their families back. David didn't stay in that cave for much longer either. God shaped him, molded him, turned him into the leader, into the man that he wanted him to be. Now, did David make mistakes after this? Absolutely. He did. He's just like you and I. Just like you and I. But he lived a remarkable life. And I think so much of it is because he felt the love of God when all he felt was the weight of failure. when he found his strength in the Lord. Now, a little bit of application here, maybe a lot. But I'm going to run through another passage from Hebrews. Because I've wondered as I look at that verse, but David strengthened himself in the Lord, his God. How? What does that look like? Is that a fair question? Would you like to know how you do that? So I've asked a lot of people lately. I've asked some people in here, how do you do that? How do you personally do that? And what's always been great is they turn it around on me. And of course, I could put up here a couple of points where, you pray and you read your Bible. And that's definitely part of it. But there's a passage in Hebrews that fascinates me. It's a familiar one. But in Hebrews 12, verses 1 through 2, I think this is one way you can do it, because just a little context before I read it. Hebrews was written to believers who were having a hard time. It was written to people who were ready to quit. And they said, we started following this Jesus, and it's not quite working out for us. Some of us have lost our homes. Some of us have lost our jobs. We've lost family. We've lost friends. Some have lost everything, and they were ready to throw in the spiritual towel. And the writer of Hebrews is writing this epistle with the basic tenet of just saying, don't quit. Don't quit. Yes, this looks bad, but you know what? It's exactly what Jesus said it was going to be like. The world hated me, they're going to hate you. But you can trust him. He will give you strength, and he will make you stronger, and he will make you better for it. Don't quit. And just a great tenet, we're going to know that God does his best work in caves, but it also doesn't matter in life how you start, it's how you finish. We're going to have some obstacles. And he is imploring them to not quit. So in chapter 12, verse 1, in fact, I think I've got this one. Maybe. There we go. Therefore, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses, is now, of course, the therefore, we have to ask, what's the therefore? Well, you go back to chapter 11. And that's the famous chapter, the hall of faith, the hall of fame of Old Testament heroes. David's in there, Enoch's in there, Samson, Rahab, all of these great, Noah, these great heroes of the faith. So he said, hey, these people have been on this track that you are on. And every one of them has made mistakes. Every one of them has failed. Moses killed a guy. We know, David committed adultery. He killed people. He said, but these people lived a life after God's heart. And if they can do it, so can you. So he says, therefore, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us, you've got these people who've been on this track before. But also, I think going back to chapter 10, where it says, let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another and spur one another on to good deeds. He's talking about the church, the early church. He said, you've got the people that you're worshiping with every week, the people you do church with, that you do life with. And you've got these people in Scripture that have done it. Since you've got these people, here's what you do. If you don't want to quit, if you want to keep pressing on and endure, lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. The writer of Hebrews says, here's what you do. First of all, you need community. My wife and I, we've been fortunate enough to work with Merge and Reengage. And the one thing, and even in talking to different counselors that I come into contact with, the constant thing they say about people that they see is they must have community. They must have someone to do life with, a shoulder to cry on, or to have a shoulder they can cry on. as we're doing this race, to give them a cup of water, to encourage them, to spur them on. In fact, I'm seeing a lot of, merged people going, yep, we talk about this. So community. Strengthen you can be strengthened through that. And also, lay aside every encumbrance. Now, an encumbrance is just a fancy word that, I'm probably gonna have to look up in the dictionary. But it's just an obstacle. It's not necessarily something bad. It's just something you don't need. To keep the track theme going here of running, if I'm gonna go out on a run tomorrow morning, I don't need to get a ski jacket and put it on and run. It's just gonna slow me down. There's nothing wrong with a ski jacket, but I don't need it. I don't need it. But he says, put down the stuff you don't need, whatever that is. And then I love it says, lay aside the sin that so easily entangles you. Now, I honestly don't know, is this just a general, obviously sin, whatever secret sin you deal with, whatever public sin you deal with, to live a life really going after God, running after him, get rid of it. But there's that little article here of the sin. If it's a specific sin, the Hebrews were struggling with unbelief. They were failing to trust God today with what he said about tomorrow. And I don't know if I can promise you, but I think while David was in that cave, he was able to trust God at that moment, knowing that he had tomorrow. And the last thing is to keep your eyes on Jesus. That's the most churchy thing I could come up with, but it's right out of this, is keep your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. He got us in this race, and he will sustain us through it. How do you strengthen yourself? Keep your eyes on Jesus. And there's a couple things, a couple applications I want to give you. One just came a couple weeks ago to me, because we worry about so much. Maybe I'm the only one. Okay, I'm getting some affirmation. We worry about some silly stuff, don't we? I've thrown some heavy things out there, but we worry about some silly things. Let me ask a question. I need you to participate right now. I need a show of hands. Anyone in here worry and it really benefits your life, that it's this life-giving source to you, your worry? Anyone? Okay. Well, I got to tell you, my daughter, my youngest daughter, she and her husband's house flooded a few weeks ago. It's a month ago, I don't know. It's been a while. And so while they're fixing it, they're living with us. Now, her husband, Jace, was down in San Antonio at Lackland this past week. Oh, no, wait, you were in Waco. He was in Waco. You were in Waco this week. I got to get the story right, Jace. She's talking to him, and I overheard the conversation, and she's just talking about restoring the house. And there's a lot going on, and none of it sounded good at all. And it was, well, there's this going on at work, and the house, and the house, and the house, and the house. And then she threw out this little bit of wisdom at him. Hey, it could be worse. And I'm in the corner of the kitchen going, could it? Could it? But she was so optimistic, which is just, I don't even know if that's like her. She was so optimistic. She said, it could be worse. And I thought, what if I applied that to my life? When I start to worry about something, especially something stupid, just say it could be worse. And so I'm going to challenge y'all to do that this week. In fact, I want us to say it together, okay? I want you to be practiced when you leave. On 3, we as a church, we're just going to say, hey, it could be worse, all right? All right, 1, 2, 3. It could be worse. That's pretty good. I'm not even going to do the thing where I make you do it again because you did great. Okay, here's my challenge to you. You're going to walk out of here in a minute, and you're going to go to your car, and you might walk by a car that's better than yours, that's newer than yours. It's more expensive, shinier, got more stuff. It's not going to be mine. But you're going to do that. And you might be tempted to just, why don't I have that? The little discontent could creep into your heart. But today, you're going to say to yourself with great passion, okay, with great passion, could be worse. All right. You may go to a Christmas party or a work party or something in the next few weeks and go to someone's house that's better than yours. It's bigger, nicer, newer, more stuff. Or maybe they just have a better TV than whatever. But you're going to be tempted to be jealous. And again, seeds of discontent in your heart. But not this time, because this time you're going to say to yourself with great passion, could be worse. Tomorrow morning, my wife is going to wake up. She's going to roll over and look at me. And she's going to say, could be worse. I don't know what it says that hers was the only voice I could hear there. All right. Could be worse. Because the one thing everyone said, how do you strengthen yourself in the Lord? It had to do with perspective. Seeing things as God does. And whether that's the brevity of our life, how it's a vapor, it's a mist, it's here and gone. But just to see the things as God does, what really matters. David left that cave, led this remarkable life. He was loved so much that everyone wanted another king just like him. We want another king just like David. That guy was awesome. He was so loved. And it just never happened. He got a bunch of clowns, starting with David's son and his grandson. Holy smokes. That guy was crazy. He was. And then at the end of the Old Testament history time and the end of the prophets, we get to Malachi. And the last verse of the Old Testament is, lest I come smite the earth with a curse. I mean, that's a bad cliffhanger right there. You don't want to wait for the next season that long, but it took 400 years. 400 years of darkness. Israel waiting, just as this beaten up, bedraggled little country in the middle of the Middle East, waiting for hope. And Jesus comes. To restore relationship, to make things right. And I don't have a ton of time here, but I do want to share this. I'm going to run through it, which is probably good because I'll get emotional if I took my time here. But when we start talking about having a relationship with God, that can junk a lot of us up because we're not really good at relationships, are we? And that can be kind of scary. And we project a lot of what we dealt with our family or in our little circle onto God. And I'll just say this, my brother and I, we come from a broken home. My parents were divorced right after we saw the 10 Commandments. I don't think it was related. But to be quite honest, didn't like my dad at all. Don't remember him that much from when my parents were married. He lived in Houston, we lived in Dallas. Not much of a relationship at all. We saw him a few weekends a year, a couple of weeks because the court said we had to, didn't want to. I was in 9th grade. He came to town on business. And it happened to be the last week of basketball season. He came to a couple of my games. And I didn't like the guy, but it was kind of cool to have him there. You know, miss a shot, run down the court, see your dad up there. And a couple of weeks later, he showed up and unannounced at our house. And he said, hey, I'm in town on business again. Wanted to see if you and your brother want to get some pizza. And we don't like our dad, but I'm 14 years old. Pizza's pizza. So I'm out the door, and we go to Pizza Inn on Greenville Avenue, Dallas, Texas. And over a couple of large hamburger pizzas with beef and extra cheese and some root beers, my dad told us that he lied to us. and that he wasn't really in town on business. God, even running through it fast, I'm going to cry. He said he'd had so much fun at those games that he went back to Houston. He quit his job, put his townhome on the market, and he was in town looking for a job and a place to live because he was never going to miss another game. And in that moment, everything that had happened before was gone. I remember crying. I remember my brother going over the table, not coming around. He was 12, straight into our dad's arms. In that moment, our father became our dad. And we were fortunate to have 40 incredible years with him after that, where he was an all-star grandfather to these guys over here and a great dad. And I love that story. But it pales in comparison to the story of a God who left his place so he could come have a relationship with his kids because he didn't want to miss any of our stuff. And Jesus came, and like David, everything he touched turned to gold for a while, didn't it? Or wine. And he built a following. He had friends. He had the status as a rabbi. Everything was going well until it didn't. And then like David, one by one, things got taken away from him. The adoration was gone. His friends left him. His position as rabbi was taken from him. He lost his freedom. He lost his clothes. He lost his dignity. And he lost his life. The Romans made a huge mistake, though, because they forgot one very powerful but simple truth. Where'd they put Jesus when he died? They put him in a cave. And they forgot God does his best work there. It's where he brings dead things to life. It's where resurrection happens. And as Frederick Buechner says, resurrection means the last thing is never the worst thing. And Jesus didn't stay in that cave. And he walks with us today. The same, again, if God did it for Moses, he'll do it for me. He did it for David, he'll do it for me. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead is the power that walks with us today. And I just want us to walk expectantly through this holiday season. Expect God to show up and to strengthen us today. Let's pray with me. God, thank you for your word and for the powerful truths that we can see, that you are a God who meets us in our deepest and darkest needs. I mean, you're the God of the mountain, you're the God of the valley, but you're also the God of the cave. And we just want to celebrate you, your goodness, your holiness that you call us to live in. We thank you for your grace. And Father, I just pray that we will live a life that lines up with these words when we say we love you, and we do. And we pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.